Good morning to all. Welcome for the session. Myself, Dr. Shivaranjani, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Application, handling Advanced Java Programming for 3rd BCA students. Today we'll discuss about RMI Development Life Cycle. So what is meant by RMI programming? RMI stands for Remote Method Innovation. It is a mechanism that allows an object residing in the system called as JVM to access or invoke an object running on the other JVM. JVM is nothing but Java Virtual Machine. RMI is used to build a distributed application. It provides a remote communications between your Java program. It is provided inside the package called as java.rmi. Architecture of RMI application. In RMI application, we can write two programs. That is, one is Java program, that is a server program, and another one is a client-side program. So that help us to invoke a connection establishment between the client-server architecture. Inside the server program, there is a remote object is created, and a reference of that object is made available for the client using the concept called as registry. The client program requests the remote object on the server and it tries to invoke its method. This is the architecture of the RMI application. It has two different parts. That is, one is client side and another one is server side. In client side, you have the controls like stub, RRL, and transport layer, and in server side you have a concept like a component like skeleton, RRL, and transport layer. So here the virtual connection establishment between the client and the server is done by the help of this RRL, and the network connection is established by the help of this network layer. So the client and server can communicate with each other by the help of this transport layer. So by the help of the concept called as RMI, the client can be located in one different location and the server can be located in another different locations. So here the connection establishment has been done by using this RMI concept by the help of the transport layer. And the connection establishment is done by the virtual connection, that is by the help of RRL, and the client will pass this particular request to the server by the help of this stub container, and the server will accept the particular request from the client by the help of this skeleton component, and it will pass the particular command to the server, and it will go and search for the particular data which has been requested by the client, and will send the particular data to the server as a response. So this is the architecture layout of the RMI application. So some of the components, we'll see what the major components we are using inside your RMI applications. The transport layer, stub, next is skeleton, and RRL. So transport layer is the one which will help you to connect the client and the server. It will manages the existing connection and also set up the new connection. By the help of this transport layer, the connection has been establishment between the client and the server. And a stub is a representation or a proxy of the remote object at client. It is present in the client system. It acts as a gateway for the client program. And the next concept is skeleton. This is an object which resides on the server side, and the stub communicate with the skeleton to pass the request to the remote object. So this is the way the stub and the client will be working together by the component called as a stub and the component called as a skeleton. The next one is RRL. RRL is nothing but a remote reference layer. It is a layer which manages the references made by the client to the remote object. So next is the working architecture or the working principle of RMI applications. So here we'll have some kind of how does these particular RMI application will work it out. When the client makes a call to the remote object, it receives by the stub which eventually passes this request to the RRL. When the client-side RRL receives the request, it invokes a method called as invoke method of the object remote RF. It passes the request to the RRL on the server side. The RRL on the server side passes the request to the skeleton proxy on the server, which finally invokes the required object on the server. The result is passed all the way back to the client. So this is the working architecture of your RMA applications. So before getting into the flow of or the connection establishment between the client and the server, we need to know the two different type of process. One is called as a marshalling process and another one is called as unmarshalling process. So whenever so we'll see what is meant by marshalling process and unmarshalling process is it. Whenever a client invoke a method that accepts a parameter on the remote object, the parameters are bundled into a message before being sent over the network. So here in Marshall, there is the messages will be put into a bundle, and after bundling it will passes the particular message over the network. This parameters may be the primitive type or an object type. In the case of primitive type, the parameters are put together and a header is attached to it. In the case of parameters or object in the sense, then they will be serialized. So only one data can be passed at a time. So this process is called as a marshalling. So here in the case of marshalling process, the messages are bundled into a bundled, and after bundling it, then it will pass over the network. Where in the case of this unmarshal will be taken place inside the server side. So here the packet parameters are unbundled, and then they required a method to invoke the particular process. So this process is called as an unmarshalling process. So the important thing is RMI Registry. So the RMI Registry is a namespace on which all the server objects are placed. So each time the server creates an object, it registers this object with RMI Registry by the method called as an binding method. Or if it has been already binded, then it will use a method called as a rebind. So these are the registered using as a unique name known as a bind name. To invoke a remote object, the client needs a reference of the object. At the time, the client fetches the object from the registry using its bind name by using a method called as lookup method. So this is the working architecture of the RMI Registry. So here you'll have a client and the server. So the client will invoke a method by using a fetch object to the server. Then if the connection has been established, connection is established between the client and the server, then it is necessary to use a method called as a rebind method. Or if it is a new connection, then it will use a method called as a bind method to use the particular connection establishment. Then it will make a connection establishment between the client and the server. After the connection has been established, then it fetches the object from the registry by using a method called as lookup method. So this is the working architecture of RMI Registry. The next thing is goal of RMI. The main goal is to minimize the complexity of the application, to preserve the type safety, distributed garbage collection, minimizing the difference between the working with local and the remote objects. So this is some of the goals of the RMI applications. So next thing is how to run your RMI. So you have to follow the 5 different steps to run your RMI. The first thing is you have to compile all your Java files by using a command called as javac, the file name .java. Then you have to create a stub and skeleton object by the RMIC tool by using a command called as RMIC adder remote. So this will help you to create a stub and a skeleton object. The next thing you have to do is you have to start the registry in the one command prompt by using a command called as RMI registry 5000. After registry has been done, then you can start the server in another command prompt, and then you have to execute the particular server program by using a keyword called as a Java and the name of the particular server name as my server. Then after that, starting your server, then you have to start your client application in another command prompt by using a command called as Java my client. So here the my client will refers to the name of the client application, and my server refers to the name of the server application to be run. So this is what about the RMA way of executing. So here, to write your RMI application in your Java programming, then you have to follow the 6 different steps. That is, first you have to define the remote interface. The second one is you have to develop the implementation classes. That is nothing but your remote object. And the third thing is you have to develop the server program. And the fourth one is you have to develop the client program. After the fifth step is you have to compile your application, whether you have any errors. You have to check it out, and the last step is you have to execute your applications. So we'll see how this particular thing will work it out. The first thing is defining the remote interface. The remote interface provides the description of all the methods of a particular remote objects. So the client communicate with this remote objects. So to create a remote interface, you have to follow 2 different things. That is, the first one is you have to create an interface that extends the predefined interface remotes which belongs to the package, and then you have to declare all the methods that can be invoked by the client in this interface. So these are the 2 things you have to make note of it when you're creating a remote interface. Since there is a changes of network issues during the remote calls, so you can also make use of your exception handling mechanism. So for that you can make use of remote exception can be used. So this will help you to throw out the exception handling mechanisms also. The second, here this is the program which will help you to create know you how to create a remote interface of your application. So here I have used 2 kind of package. The one is called as java.rme.remote. So this will help you to establish a connection between your client and the server. And the next package is used to throw your exception in your program. That is, when there is any error has been occurred in the client side or the server side, then the exception has been thrown out to the user or for the client for the easy accessor. So for that purpose, I have used this particular exception handling mechanism in my program. So the first step is we are going to create a remote interface of your application. So here I have created an interface name called as hello. So that will create an interface, and we are extending a class called as remote to my program. So in that particular interface, I'm displaying a message. I'm defining a function called as the print message. So that will help you to print the message if there is any kind of difficulties has been faced by in the connection establishment between the client and the server. So this is the first step. And the second step is you have to develop the implementation classes. So we need to implement the remote interface created in the earlier step. We can write an implementation class separately, or we can directly make the server program implement to this interfaces. So can either directly implement the class separately, or you can directly make use of your server program to make implement in the particular step. So to develop an implementation class, you have to implement the interfaces created in your previous step. And the second step is you have to provide an implementation to all the abstract method of the remote interfaces. So this is the 2 way you can able to create interfacing, that is developing your implementation classes. So the first one is implementing the remote interface. That is, I have created a class called as example, and I'm implementing the class called as hello. That's what I have created in the step 1. And then now I'm creating now I'm implementing the interfaces method called as a print message. That what I created in my first step. So here I'm going to display a message that this is an example of RMI program. So this is the second step you have to do in your RMI application development. And the third step is you have to develop the server program. So an RMI server program should be implement the remote interfaces or extend the implementation classes. Here we should create a remote objects and bind it to the RMI registry. To develop a server program, first you have to create a client class. from where you want to invoke your remote objects. So creating a remote object by instantly by implementing the classes by using a function called as export the remote object using the method called as export object of the class named as unicast remote object, which belongs to the package called as java.rma.server. And the second thing is you have to get an RMI registry by using a method called as getRegistry method of local registry class, so which belongs to a package called as java.rma registry. So the next thing you have to do in the developing server side is binding the remote object created to the registry using the bind method of the class named registry. To do this, you have to pass the string representing the binding name and the object exported as a parameters. So this example will explain how this RMI server program will work it out. So I'm import some certain class packages inside my Java program. The first thing is RMI registry. Then you have to locate the particular registry you have made between your client and the server. And in the case of any connection establishment, any problem has been encountered between the connection establishment between the client and the server, then the remote exception package will help you to throw the exceptions between the client and the server. And the next one is you're using your for establish the binding connections between the client and the server, you will use the unicasting remote object. So this will help you to implement all the concept of this RMI application program inside your Java program to run or to establish a connection establishment between the client and the server. So here I have created a class called as a server. So that will extend impl example class inside my program. So inside this server, I have created a constructor, and in main I have created a try. So if there is any error has been, I'm initializing the implementation classes, and then I'm exporting the object of the implementation of classes by the function called as hello stub is equal to hello. And I'm using a unicasting remote object that is obj for establish the connection establishment. And the next one is binding the remote object stub in registry. So for that registry, I have created a keyword by using a keyword called as registry, and I have named as registry equal to locate registry dot get registry. So this will help you to make a connection establishment between the client and the server. Then registry.bind equal to hello. I'm in the client side, I'm giving a message called as hello. And if there is any error, then you have to print a message that server is ready. And in exception side, I have thrown a server exception, and that will throw if there is any error has been encountered in the case of your server side program. So the next step is, the fourth step is developing the client program. So far we have developed a server program. Now we are going to develop a client side programming. So you have to write a client program in it, fetch the remote objects and invoke the required method using this object. So the first thing is you have to develop a client program. You have to create a client class from where you can intend to invoke the remote objects. Then the second thing is you have to get RMI registry using your get registry method of locate registry classes, which belongs to a package called as java.rme.registry classes. So the next one is fetching the object from the registry using the method called as lookup of the class registry, which belongs to the package called as java.rma.registry. To do this, you need to pass a string value representing the binding name as a parameter. So this will returns a remote object to you. Next one is by using a method called as lookup return of an object type remote down casted to type hello. Finally, invoking the required method using the obtained remote objects. So this example will demonstrate how this particular client program has been developed. So I have created a class called as a client, and I used a constructor in main. If there is any error has been occurred at the time of client side, then it has to find out and it has to be thrown as a message as hello, I'm here. And the next thing is you have to calling the remote method using the obtained object. So by using struct.print message, then I'm going to display the message remote method invoked. Okay, so this is what the try statement will invoke. And the next, in catch statement, you'll have a exception for the user, and by the help of your print statement, you can provide the client exception and what kind of error you have been encountered at the time of connection establishment between the client and the server can be thrown out by the help of this catch statement. So the next fifth step is you have to compile your application. So to compile the application, you have to compile your remote interfaces, compile the implementation classes, then you have to compile your server program, then only you can compile your client program. So here, this is the next step, that is your sixth step. Executing the application. So first you have to use three different type of step for executing your RMA application. The first one is you have to start your RMA registry using the following command called as start RMA registry. So this will help you to start your RMA registry on the separate window. So this is the first step. And in the second step, you can run your server class file by using the name of the server file you have named it. So I've used a server name as Java, that is your server S caps. So now I'm executing the particular server program. Then the third step is you're going to run your client classes. So for that I have used Java client. So this will help you to execute the client side program. So once the verification is done, then it will go and check for the verification. As soon as you start your client, you will see the following output in the server. So once the client is executing the program, then the server will get a message that hello, I'm server, I'm a client. So you'll be able to see that as an output. So this is the way you can execute your program, your RMA application in your Java environment. That's it. So if you have any doubts, you can clarify your doubts during the class sessions. That's it. Thank you all.